The explanation of the narrative begins with the introduction of Synsect, the private genetic engineering company that is actively working on various projects. Their core objective was to create an extraordinary human being, one who would be fundamentally better than an ordinary person. To commence this ambitious project, they started by attempting to create a hybrid biological organism, though it was noted that this creation was not purely biological. Their methodology involved the use of nanotechnology in conjunction with DNA. Furthermore, they utilized the nervous system, employing it in a manner described as double dealing, to ensure that the artificial being's entire mind and nervous system would accept the nanoparticle. The company achieved initial success in this project, which allowed them to proceed with further experimentation. However, the completion of their first iteration resulted in an artificial being in the worst possible condition. The failure stemmed from the fact that the artificial being's DNA did not accept the nanoparticles, resulting in them being released outside. Consequently, their initial experiment for the creation of artificial beings had flopped. Following this failure, a second artificial being was created. This second attempt resulted in a being who was physically fit, but still suffered from some residual mental disorders. Despite these setbacks, the specialists learned significantly from these early experiments. Subsequently, the third artificial being was created. It was with this creation that they finally succeeded in producing the best artificial being. They named this successful entity Morgan. The artificial being that was created was a baby girl, and she possessed all human emotions. The presence of this human emotional response was attributed to the synthetic DNA that had been inserted. This synthetic DNA contained nanotechnology, which was useful because it promoted good cell growth and resulted in a strong immune system. In fact, her immune system and her mental ability were both higher and stronger than those of ordinary human beings. It could be summarized that she seemed half human being while being half artificial being. She possessed everything characteristic of human beings, with the singular exception of a soul. Such artificial entities might not have been achievable by any other research facility. The scientists involved were specialists who had dedicated their whole lives to this project, viewing the creation of the artificial being as the great part of their professional life. As time passed, Morgan was growing up. She was described as jolly and was liked by everyone involved in the project. The specialists used to treat her as if she were their own daughter. She was particularly loved by Dr. Amy, who treated Morgan with care, much like her own daughter, and often took her out for recreation. One day, Amy took Morgan for a walk in the forest, as was their usual custom. That day, however, their trip crossed the typical limit. While in the forest, Morgan killed a wounded deer. This deer was dying badly, and its survival was difficult. However, the doctors found this act strange, as the fixed programming in the artificial being was not intended to allow it to take the life of humans or any other living being. Seeing this, all the doctors were surprised and took the action as unexpected. Consequently, they locked her up in a room, deeming her dangerous. This action was necessary because they had to report the incident to their senior doctors. These seniors were the ones who issued commands that these entities were supposed to obey. Morgan, though only 5 years old, was unique compared to other human beings and was growing rapidly day by day. She strongly disliked her imprisoned life, living within boundaries, because she had been leading a free life before this incident. She constantly remembered her former free life. One night, a therapist visited Morgan and approached her to speak with her. In this difficult situation, Morgan lost control over her emotions and attacked the therapist. As a result, the therapist's eye was injured. Despite this violent action, the doctors did not diminish their feeling of love for Morgan, understanding that she had emotional responses similar to human beings, though these feelings were always uncontrolled. Taking the matter seriously, they reported it to their head office. Following the report, Morgan came under suspicion, as they assumed they had made an error in creating this synthetic being. Experts were then dispatched to the location to investigate the artificial being's wellness, with the understanding that if they had genuinely made a mistake, they needed to be able to erase it. Lee Weathers, a lady doctor, was sent out specifically to cope with the problem. She was described as strict and one who resolved her issues craftily. Upon arrival, she started interrogations with everyone involved. She discovered that all the staff were very close to the artificial being, a proximity she disliked. Interestingly, the wounded therapist blamed herself for the incident, thereby exonerating Morgan. Following this initial investigation, psychologist Dr. Allen was selected to treat Morgan for her mental disorder. The decision about whether Morgan was normal or not would be made after this treatment. Initially, the other doctors explained to Dr. Allen that he should converse with Morgan across the room and not directly, as they considered it dangerous. However, the psychologist disagreed, stating that he wanted to talk to her directly, a decision the other doctors eventually agreed upon. Psychologist Dr. Allen then came before Morgan and asked her some questions. She responded with assurance and wisdom. She expressed regret for the action she committed against the therapist. She offered an apology and assured him that she would avoid such actions in the future. Dr. Allen, being a wise doctor, applied a psychological test on her. This test included questions designed to anger any common person. This clearly demonstrated that Morgan's emotional response was distinct from that of an ordinary human being. Upon hearing these questions, her condition began to worsen. When Dr. Allen asked her to stop, she refused, as Morgan did not want to comply. Becoming angry, she attacked Drive Allen by biting him on the neck. At this point, she was no longer out of danger for any common person. Following this second attack, Morgan was intoxicated. Dr. Lee then instructed everyone to kill Morgan, based on their belief that she was a flopped artificial being created by them. Despite the instruction to kill her, the doctors still harbored affectionate feelings for Morgan, but everyone ultimately agreed to the plan. She was tied up, and a plan was formulated to end her life. However, a doctor named Drive Darren refused to kill Morgan. A dispute arose between Drive Lee and Dr. Darren due to this refusal. After the dispute, the doctors who sided with Morgan made Lee senseless by getting together and locking her in Morgan's room. They then decided to escape, taking Morgan with them. As they were preparing to end her life, Morgan requested them not to kill her, stating, "I want to survive." Consequently, they made Morgan senseless and took her with them, leaving Lee locked in the room. As they succeeded in bringing her into consciousness while traveling with her, she suddenly attacked everyone. She killed Drive Darren and also injected a nearby standing man, killing him as well. Morgan was significantly changed, as Dr. Allen's psychological test had emotionalized her. He had stirred her emotions, including her anger. Because of this, she began to regard everyone as a foe, not a peer. She killed everyone present except for Dr. Amy. Afterward, she took Drive Amy with her. The reason she spared Drive Amy was that she had grown up under her care. Dr. Amy used to care for her and take her for excursions. Before the incidents in her imprisonment, Drive Amy had promised Morgan that she would take her to the lake. Now that she was outside, Morgan asked Drive Amy to take her to that lake. Amy was deeply worried, pondering what she should do in this situation. Meanwhile, Drive Lee had made it her primary mission to kill the artificial being. She pursued Morgan, and the two eventually met in a forest. During the ensuing fight, Morgan seriously injured Drive Lee. Despite her injuries, Drive Lee later managed to drown Morgan. It is confirmed that Morgan murdered all of the project's doctors. The sources reveal that Morgan was merely a small sample of a larger initiative. The company was working on artificial intelligence alongside the development of human behavior. Dr. Lee herself was presented as a great example of this work. Although she looked like a human being, she was, in fact, not. She was one of the doctor's projects, an artificial being. It is specified that Dr. Lee was created before Morgan. Unlike Morgan, Drive Lee exhibited no emotional response like humans, but instead possessed the thoughts of warriors. This raises the question of why they had been able to successfully create Drive Lee but not Morgan. The difference lay in the fact that they had ingrained positive feelings in Morgan. These positive aspects, similar to what human beings admire, included liberty and a variety of other advantages. Morgan had a genuine fondness for visiting wooded areas, meadows, and ponds. Crucially, she was not concerned with the physician's project. Therefore, the final conclusion was that they would forbid the creation of artificial beings like Morgan and instead focus on making the artificial being patterned after Dr. Lee more successful.